These artist trading cards are all about watercolor experiments. So we're going to need watercolor paper, and there's two sides to watercolor paper. There's usually a side that's kind of bumpy, that's called tooth, and there's a side that's smooth. If there is a side that has a little bit more bump, that's the side that we want our artwork to go on. I have a larger piece of paper here so that we can do 4 experiments today. So as you can see, if I take my artist trading card tracer, I can draw around it, and I should be able to fit 4 artist trading cards on this one piece of paper. I'm using a pencil so that I can erase it later if I so choose. Perfect. Now we are going to make 4 different kinds of artist trading cards using watercolor. This first one is going to be dry brush. 2 is going to be wet on wet. 3 is going to be resist, and 4, I'm going to use some salt. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, I drew those letters very light, very small, so that I know exactly what technique I'm using for each card. Now, let's do the dry brush to start out with. I have my water, my watercolors, and my brush. Get your brush nice and wet and activate your colors. That means you're going to put a little bit of water in each of your pans. These are pans. The watercolor, where the watercolor is, those are called pans. Dry brush means that you have dry paper, but you still have a wet brush. I don't know why they call it dry brush, but they do. And you're going to make your design just using a dry brush. Now you will be amazed with watercolor how much control you have when you use dry brush. I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I'm making shapes and lines to make designs. I'm going to change my color, so I go into my water, rinse it off. I might have some paper towel near me so I can dab it off, and I'll choose a different color. Maybe I'll go red. So you're going to add your color all the way across this artist trading card using dry brush. Let me show you another cool thing with dry brush that you can do. I'm going to go back into that purple. If I take and add a second color, see how it starts traveling across? There can be some nice blends when you are experimenting with dry brush. I'll come back to this one later. This one is wet on wet. Wet on wet means that we get the paper wet first, and then we add the color. So I'm adding wet on this entire artist trading card. It's hard to see this, I know, in the camera, but you want to make sure that you reach every part of this card. Now I'm going to choose my colors. I'll take that red again and watch what happens. When I put the color on wet paper, it explodes. It's a lot of fun. I'll put another color next to it. Notice that the red exploded much faster than what we're seeing from the blue. You really start to understand that colors have different properties when you start experimenting like this. The yellow hardly spreads at all. Very interesting. Anyways, you'll fill up your whole entire piece of paper using wet on wet. You don't have to use spots like I'm using. You could use lines. You could use shapes. It's kind of interesting to see how the colors interact with each other. All right, let's move on to another one. Resist. Resist means that we are going to use a crayon first or an oil pastel. And you're going to draw your picture, and it can be a picture or it can be a design. Right now I'm just going to do kind of a doodle, a little design. And I'll fill up the entire artist training card. I'm not going to take the time to do that because I want to show you what you can do next. Okay, I have a good start to my design. I'll finish this one later as well. When you use wax or oil pastel, wax being the crayon, or oil pastel, and then you watercolor over the top of it, I'm going to go right over the top. It resists the water or the watercolor. So it says, nope, you can't go there. This is my spot. It can allow you two things. I'm just kind of showing you what going all across it will do, but it can allow you to be a little bit more controlled as well. So if you want to add color around the whole thing, that's fine. But if you want to be more precise, it kind of helps you keep color in a specific spot or out of a specific spot. So then I can put colors next to each other like this. This last one is salt, and I'm going to do the lower half of my card here. Again, we're going to use the wet on wet technique. So I'm covering my card with water. And then I need to add some color to that. The more color, the better. So we need a lot of that pigment. And again, I just kind of like blending my colors when it comes to wet on wet, adding 2 or 3 colors. And I try to think about the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. That way I know that they're going to blend together beautifully. And while my paper is still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of salt, just a pinch, and place it on top. I don't want to add too much, just a little bit. And now we have to wait for the magic to happen. We actually have to let it dry before we can see what the salt does.